Spectrovision Radio.
Hey, quick note about today's episode. We had a recording glitch that cost us the first few minutes of Courtney's audio and video, so her entrance is going to seem a little bit abrupt. There were no problems after that, but please forgive the weird intro. Thanks. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Gods, Ghosts, and UFOs. My name is Jordan, and I'm here with my long-suffering co-host, Mallory.
Woo!
This is a show about all the things they said weren't real. Today we have a guest with us. Her name is Courtney Buterbaugh, and she is a lifelong experiencer, a terrific writer and thinker. Her Substack is called The Unidentified Felt Object, which is such a great name, but also makes me think of felt, the material, every single time I read it, which is actually not a bad thing. Anyway, I'm digressing.
Yeah.
Courtney writes about how the so-called phenomenon is something that should be interrogated and discussed and, well, experienced in our bodies, as bodies, that we can't just think about it and talk about it. We have to feel it, quite literally, using the senses we can name and also the ones we can't. Hence the name of her publication. A quick reminder to everyone that's listening that we are recording this live, first on Substack, which means if you want to be there for future live recordings, you can. Just head over to ggupodcast.substack.com or find the link in the description, and we'd love to have you. So, before we dive into the question, the one about something they said wasn't real, I wanted to point out the last line in your Substack bio, Courtney, which says, experiencers are the disclosure, which I think is such a great thing to say, and I wonder if you'd be willing to unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so the idea it arises from the misconception, I think, that disclosure is all about nuts and bolts crafts that come from somewhere else in space or time, that they are piloted here. And I don't think that that's entirely incorrect, but the entire disclosure conversation focuses purely on that idea. And sometimes I feel like it's refusing to acknowledge the fact that this is an experiencer-mediated phenomenon before it's anything else. You know, people are so obsessed with this idea that can we prove they're here? Can we prove that there are craft? Can we prove that they have crashed? Personally, I believe that, yeah, those things probably are true, but they're missing the forest for the trees in that people have been experiencing these anomalous phenomena as individuals in their bodies for at least as long as there have been human beings. And I feel like that is not being acknowledged in the larger space that talks about disclosure. And I think the main reason for that is that experiencer stories you can't control experiencer stories. You can't make them conform to a tidy narrative that suits policy positions or whatever the idea that somebody is attached to about what this is. Because when you start engaging directly with experiencer stories, you find out how messy they are, how untidy they are, how they bring in aspects like the body, like dead people, like paranormal phenomena, you know, gods, ghosts, and UFOs. I mean, literally, it is all of those things get brought into the discussion when you start actually talking to experiencers. And so I feel like that is one of the main reasons that experiencers have kind of been excluded from this larger disclosure narrative and the dialogue that's going on. And so I like to bring it back to the experiencers. I feel like we need a seat at the table if we're going to move forward in a meaningful way about what UFOs are and what is happening to us as a human species at this point in our evolutionary arc.
I really want to ask you what you think is happening to us, but I feel like we should talk about the experiences first. We should ask the larger questions first, but I would love to hear.
Yeah, but it's impossible to talk about one thing and not talk about all of the other things, which makes this extremely hard to talk about because there are all of these rabbit holes that I could talk about this for years without drawing breath because it's such a rich vein of discourse that touches on not only my personal experience, but, like I said, the entire arc of human history and what it means to be embodied. You mentioned earlier that Jordan, that's one of my main lenses through which I approach the experiencer phenomenon and anomalous phenomena in general, because I am personally an experiencer of what we would probably all agree is alien contact. But I've also had a lifetime of experience that began with a near-death experience when I was 18 months old, and a lifetime of seeing spirits and having spontaneous out-of-body experiences, psychic phenomena, precognitive dreams, a wild time slip experience that I had with my father. So the actual alien part of it, although in retrospect it's been going on my entire life, my conscious awareness of that is a relatively new piece of this whole puzzle. It's such a human phenomenon that I see no other way to interpret it as that this is something that lands in our bodies and happens through the human instrument.
Do you want to talk a little more specifically about what you mean when you talk about experiencing it in your body?
Yeah. So I recently started on my Substack trying to work through this idea that I call sort of an ontology of anomalous embodiment. And how I got there was because my own awakening journey started in 2020 during the pandemic when I got sick with long COVID. And I was bedbound for 3 years. I was so debilitated at certain points through that process that I was unable to do anything essentially but just lie there in bed. And I think the only reason that I didn't completely lose my mind was that I had a meditation practice, and so I was kind of familiar with what that could look like to just sort of be alone with your body and your thoughts. And that kind of got me through. But I was having all of these anomalous phenomena happening, including my first conscious onboard craft experience. And what I noticed was that these things came with profound bodily sensations. My first conscious onboard craft experience came with these sensations of passing through my ceiling, through the roof. It was sensations of being taken apart almost at a molecular level and put back together. It was feeling electrical conductivity through my body when I came back from the experience. It was the fact that I came back with a mark on my arm. There's some sort of physical manifestation of this thing that otherwise I would have assumed took place in some astral state. So all of these things seem to directly reference different aspects of physiological experience. Plus, as I said, I was going through this chronic illness journey at the time, and I was told by the beings that I was communicating with that healing would also be a part of my journey. And I was given this promise, I would say, of healing at some future point, which came about 18 months after that was sort of given to me through my experience. And I did improve dramatically, and to the point that I'm able to write and speak about these things now. So I had that experience. But as I began to sort of try and breadcrumb my way back through a lifetime of experience, now looking for other alien contact experiences, I started to notice that when memories would surface that I questioned as to, could this possibly be an instance of alien contact? Those memories arrived in my body. These were not purely mental phenomena. I would have these sensations, these surges in my physical body that I eventually started to realize could be reliable indicators of whether something may have actually happened, whether there was some truth to this, because it would be accompanied by physiological sensations that didn't happen any other time. It's been this stepwise process of just experiences occurring and me sort of being able to appreciate then that longitudinally, the thing that connects these all together for me is felt sensations. And I had gone to see the movie Disclosure Day, and I was there in the theater during the scene where, and this is a spoiler, but I think spoilers are probably okay at this point.
Yeah, let them rip.
Yeah, where she goes into her childhood bedroom and she's walking through her childhood bedroom and she looks up and she sees this mobile that's made out of paper cardinals. And suddenly I had this very visceral sensation of being taken out of the theater and sort of sucked back into time, into my childhood bedroom, where I had a paper cardinal clipped to the curtains in my childhood bedroom that I had made in preschool. And it unlocked this memory moment that connected me to every childhood contact experience that I had had. And like literally those experiences unraveled and landed in my body right in that moment that I was sitting in the theater. And then I'm back in the theater, and that gave me such a profound download of information, again, about how memory is tied to the body and how these experiences leave residue in our body that we can identify and trace, and that somehow therein lies something important about the nature of anomalous phenomena. And that's sort of what I'm trying to unpack in my Substack. And that's a lot of words. So.
I hear what you're saying about it being sort of difficult to navigate the subject in general, just because it feels sprawling and like it's full of twists and turns and catacombs and like synapses, like going off like tree roots. Is there a beginning? Or, you know, if you were to tell your story in a linear way, would it even make sense? Because it sounds like some of the experiences have come to you that I don't know how you would describe what happened, that you blocked them out or repressed some memories and then remembered them later. But where would you begin your story as far as your experiences, if you were going to begin somewhere, I guess, is my question.
I think I would probably have to start with the 3 years of chronic illness.
Okay.
Beginning in 2020, okay. Because at that point I had this lifetime of odd things happening, but I never really interrogated it as part of a larger thing. It was just the way my life was.
Interesting.
And it was something that I had gotten used to. There were times during my life when I would arrive at sort of a larger awareness, where it sort of occurred to me at some point when I was a young adult that these things that I thought were imaginary when I was a kid were probably, I was actually picking up on spirits of deceased human beings or whatever that phenomenon is that were in my environment. I thought I was imagining them, but I would occasionally come upon pieces of information that would corroborate these stories. Like I would have an experience in a place that had a historical story attached to it. There was a known haunting in this place that I didn't know about at the time, that I would find out at some future point. And then remembering back, I would be like, oh, wait, what I experienced matches this story. So maybe that wasn't my imagination. So it has been a process of constantly ping-ponging back and forth in time between experiences that I've had and then information that arrives later that casts context back on experiences that I had in the past. For example, I didn't even appreciate that I had had a probable near-death experience when I was 18 months old. I have had an experience of being in the hospital at that time. I had really severe pneumonia. A memory of being in the hospital has been with me my entire life. But it wasn't until I was going through this awakening process that began in 2020 that it occurred to me that my memory of this experience was looking at myself from outside my body. And that my primary sense of that was extreme peace and detachment and sensations that awarenesses that didn't really seem to comport with this being a trauma associated memory. Like, I'm very ill, I'm in the hospital, I'm 18 months old, where are my parents, I'm frightened, I'm sick. You know, like, there was none of that with it. It was this very calm, detached appraisal of the situation that was clearly from looking down on my body. And at that point, I was able to sort of contextualize it. Oh, this seems to match what happens to people when they have near-death experiences or out-of-body types of experiences. And so yeah, I would say it's been a process of constant recontextualizing.
Wow.
That reached a fever pitch during my 3 years of sickness, where things suddenly started to, that process of uncovering memories, matching them to things that had happened in my life, and then having those things arrive physically in my body accelerated dramatically through that period.
Yeah, it sounds
and
really
I don't know
intense.
if that answers, I don't know if that answers your question, but it definitely is something that does not respond well to your attempts, or to my attempts, to put it into a linear timeline. It just loops
Sure.
back on itself.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the future informs the past, which, informs the present. And it's an extremely, it's a very difficult thing to try to talk through in a linear fashion, for sure.
That makes sense to me. How do you apply what it is you feel like you're learning about this, the nature of the thing that you're experiencing? What does it feel like on a day-to-day basis for you? How do you make sense of it with your present moment? If it's sort of the future and and it's all merging, like, what do you do today? Like, how do you approach the day?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and I will kind of loop back to the original premise. You brought me here to ask me a question, and that question was, what is one thing that I understand that a lot of people maybe wouldn't believe? And what I would say, how I would sincerely answer that question, is that way more people are experiencers than than consider themselves to be experiencers. Because I believe that the nature of our engagement with the anomalous, however you want to define that, is a process that, because of the way it occurs, we encounter it in liminal spaces where how we encode our experiences of those phenomena into our memory and into our felt sensations happens in a non-ordinary state that doesn't allow this to be written into normal memory structures. And so I believe that these things can happen to people, and then it sort of gets buried somehow, or it gets recontextualized because your mental construct is trying to constantly fit these things into things that make sense. And there are ideas like screen memories that people might have heard of before, that, you experience something anomalous, but it registers as something mundane that sort of masks your ability to access the full memory of that. And so I believe that because these processes occur, far more people think they're not experiencers when in fact they might very well be. I think this is way more common than people think it is. And one of the things that I have definitely seen happen in real time as a result of Disclosure Day, for example, is that people have gone to see the movie, and there's something about how some of those scenes have landed for people that it unlocks things. And I see that happening on a pretty large scale right now for people. And that is what sort of really gave me this idea to try and think about and get into some sort of concept about how this all works. What is going on with memory? What is going on with the body when all of this happens? And so I would say that where I'm meeting it on a day-to-day basis is my experiences are ongoing. Like, this is all unfolding against a backdrop of continuous contact experiences and anomalous experiences. But what I'm really trying to do is stay in the moment with my own experiences, to surrender to those, to really sit in those and let them inform my bodily sensations, and then to try to match that against my memory. Like, I'm the lab for this. And so I'm trying to extrapolate from my own experience what might be happening in other people as I try to sort of make this make sense for my own body and my own story. But there is a lot of overlap with what I've heard other people talk about, conversations I've had with other people that have given me this idea that it probably is capable of being extrapolated beyond my own experience, that there's something identifiable and real that's going on in the process of how this is encoded into memory. That means that a lot of people can't access this, but it's there. And can we trace the residues of those experiences through our bodies and unlock the memories?
Immediately, listeners would probably, including me, because I'm listening, would be like, how would I investigate this? And, because it can sound a little scary to be like, some of your memories might not be your memories. And
Sure.
If someone was overwhelmed and was wanting to approach the subject, or felt a little nudge to approach the subject, what would you tell them to do?
I would say discernment is a difficult thing, and it's been a long time coming for me. How it best started for me was in meditation, was starting to learn how to connect with what it feels like to occupy my body, just on a day-to-day basis. What does my interiority feel like? And then over time, I would start to notice things that seem to arise from someplace outside that. And like, I've been doing this, like, I've had a meditation practice for 25 years and counting at this point. So for somebody to start out at zero at this point, I realize that my ability to discern is a product of having, a long history with being able to engage in a certain way with, like, my somatic interior, for example. I would say that somatic therapy probably has a lot of benefit for people because there are structures there. Like, there's a theoretical framework that helps people locate trauma in the body, that helps people deal with arising uncomfortable sensations and situations, that has nothing to do necessarily with the anomalous, but it does provide a framework for people, I think, that maybe don't have a good sense of their interiority, but there's a frame for people to start engaging with what it looks like to interrogate the body, to interrogate sensations in the body, and to try to recover meaning from that.
I use the word phenomenological a lot when I'm talking about this stuff, but I realize some people might not be familiar with phenomenology, which is a term I picked up in film theory class in college, which is basically the study of conscious experience from the first person point of view, independent of so-called the objective physical world, whatever that means. So there's obviously a reason that word pops up a lot when I'm talking about the phenomenon, since it seems to be best understood from a phenomenological perspective. And it also occurs to me that we have this tendency in our culture to make this really sharp separation between our mind and our body, that as though we, can think about a thing and we can understand it, we can observe it and have this objective, quote unquote, perspective that has nothing to do with the way that we feel about it. In fact, I think we've gone so far as to kind of suggest that feeling a way about something is almost invalidating. Like if you feel too much about something, then you can't have an objective perspective, which is, I guess it's true insofar as there's such a thing as objectivity. But I do think that there's the things that you're describing are somewhat anti-materialist, even though we exist in the material world, and like our somatic experiences are material. Like they manifest materially, they are felt materially. So I'm interested in this relationship between our material bodies and the immaterial things that we cannot objectively witness because we can only experience them subjectively. But I'm going to hold on to that conversation for the epilogue, because so we're just going to wrap up basically the free portion of this episode, and we're going to cut off the live in a moment here. As I said earlier, Courtney, I've been wanting to talk to you ever since I heard you on Robin Lasser's fantastic podcast, Earth: A Love Story. And this has been also fantastic. So thank you. Everyone should welcome. Subscribe to the Unidentified Felt Object. Every article you put out has been just so great. It's a grateful subscribe for me. And so we'll put a link in the notes.
Great. Thank you.
And before we wrap up the free part of today's episode, please, everyone who's listening, go show us some signs of life, please. Leave a review, a comment, click on a heart, whatever. It makes us feel good, and it helps other people find the show. And also, the invitation is always open if you want to join us and share your own experience, or if you have a recommendation for someone else we should invite, let us know in the comments or at godsghostsufos@gmail.com. That's godsghostsufos@gmail.com. And finally, to our paid supporters on Substack and Patreon, thank you so much. You're amazing, and we'll see you in the epilogue.